Hello, welcome to Dissident Canada. My name is Tyler. And before I begin, if at any point in the next, I don't know, let's push it out to a year, I develop a permanent twitch just somewhere, either in my eye or anywhere else, it will be because of reading people who are uninformed on global macro and the mechanics that dictate global macro, saying uninformed things based on um, opinions and data that haven't been fact fact tested with the reality of economics since prior to paper money's existence. Okay, I already feel it coming. It is just, oh, it's so awful. Things change in the economic system, the global economic system, global macro, on the daily. What is good and what is bad collateral and what that collateral is backing up daily changes all the time. Changes. Does not stay static. The theories of the past no longer dictate what is happening because you have universally divergent systems. One is talking about something where gold matters, and now gold is an asset, not money. Could you use it as money? Yeah, in theory, but anyways, I just wanted to get that out of the way before I started talking about the bureaucratic state and how, or one hidden reason why it took control. And it's fascinating people haven't put this together. Um, because you can see, like specifically in America, where you remove one safety guard and just bam, the bureaucracy took right over, real quick, real fast. So, what am I talking about? I am talking about the the possibility of having long-term strategic thinking in the governance system. Okay, you can use a whole bunch of models that have come to pass to prove this. Like you could use, for instance, um, China as an example. Like back when you had the dynasties and the Chinese Empire and so on and so forth, and Manchuria and so forth. Um, you could use like the Holy Roman Empire versus democracy. You could use the Roman Empire, which is probably what I'll stick to because I understand it better. Not that I don't have like a course, like a basic knowledge of governance system of other ones. It's just Rome is much more interesting and fascinating to me. Even though Chinese bureaucracy, um, prior to the modern era, is fascinating. You had to pass a strenuous test. You would think that that would uh, make the Chinese bureaucracy more competent. No, it was a test basically designed that you would have to study, like basically go to school to learn all the stuff you needed to know for the test. And seeing as that was extremely cost prohibitive, the test was literally just there to keep the peasants out of the bureaucracy and keep it, you know, upper merchant class and nobility class. It ran the bureaucracy. Like that's a fascinating thing. Of like if you were going to do, oh, who gets to vote, do the IQ test stuff that people keep throwing around to keep stupid people from voting, and it's like every time that has been used is to keep the lower classes out and shut out their sovereign rights. But back to long-term strategic planning in all variety, whether it's military planning, economic planning, political planning, cultural, economic, or did economic, agricultural, all that long-term planning, infrastructural, um, long-term planning. There were times, like if you go, say, to even early Roman Republic, you had a continuity of government in the senatorial class that allowed long-term strategic planning, whether it be, hey, we have this problem with this, city state to our north. How do we deal with it? You had um, leaders that were there for a prolonged period of time that could play the game of chess that was needed to deal with the situation to a sufficient standard. And the bureaucracy that was there was just there to support that long-standing. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't corrupt. It sure as hell was. Wherever there's any amount of power, there's corruption. But you had it didn't have the same stranglehold on the state that it does now, where you have routinely in Western democracies or constitutional republics or constitutional democracies, however you want to describe the situation, even though some are not. They are constitutional democracies of some variety and not actual republics. Um, where was I going with this? You have this again. You had the continuity of government that allowed long-term strategic thinking, but the bureaucracy hadn't taken over a large degree to the point where I remember where I was going with this, where you have in Western democracies of every variety, even the United States, where the bureaucratic state wins against the people where they derive their power from. Like specifically in the United States, the sovereign of America is not the president. He is the avatar, if you will, of the sovereign, that being the people. He uses the power bestowed upon him and disseminates it through the bureaucracy. Okay? That is the chain of how things work, how power flows in America. But you get into situations where the bureaucracy believes they are the power, they are the sovereign, and will win cases where they should not win, where power has not been granted to them, they will seize it, and then judicial power will say, "Oh well, yeah, okay, you're the bureaucracy. You can't sue the federal government, there, people. This is the law," or some stupid like that. Before the tepid overturning of the Chevron doctrine, which allowed the bureaucracy to create its own rules and regulations. That's very much how it was. Now it's kind of back and forth. As I said, it was a tepid overruling. It didn't want to completely overrule the Chevron doctrine because then you got a whole lot of case law that gets overturned, and judicial supremacy and immunity gets back on the table, and the Supreme Court of the United States was never going to deal with that. Never in a million years will they overturn that bullshit, even though it absolutely should be. But even if you go, say, advance to the Roman Empire, yes, you had a lot of corruption in the bureaucracy, but the bureaucracy serviced the real power. Well, not the real power, the people are the power, but serviced the power brokers, let's say. The Senate, which got marginalized towards the end of the Republic, or yes, towards the end of the Republic, but also towards the end of the Empire, and the Emperor and his chosen, you could say, his cabinet of sorts. Okay, but for the most of it, there was a balancing power between the Senate and the Emperor, or any of the other 50 names that the Romans used for the Emperor. Um, so, like, the bureaucratic state did not supplant the given sovereign. Even if you look into, you get into the medieval time period or Renaissance, you had a really strong and powerful king, and you did have people manipulate the king, absolutely, that were in the bureaucracy, but the bureaucracy didn't run things. Now you get towards the end of empires and the beginning of, more modern history with Western democracies. And there outgoes the long term strategic planning uh, that was prevalent in previous governance systems. Uh, so, in that case, you can see the bureaucracy seeing a power vacuum and moving into that to become the long term strategic planning of the governance structure, something that is extremely needed. But the problem is, these people have very little public. Uh, they don't really have a public side. They're, like, you can think in, say, the case of Canada, the public ministers and the deputy ministers. But, like, the real power is like two or three steps below that, of someone whose name is not published on a website, who just, you know, interprets rules and regulations and sets their own, so to speak, that does the long term planning of government. And for the most part, these people have become ideologues. Like, that's what you get with the repealment in the states, or not the repealment, but the issuance of, I think it's the 18th Amendment, that stops state legislatures from recalling senators. I believe that is the amendment. Could be a different one, though. So prior to that amendment, the state legislature, which would, for Canadians out there, is the equivalent of your um, provincial member of parliament, like that whole sector, could vote to repeal or to bring back, recall a senator that they thought was either acting against the will of the state or the people, or not representing, or for really any reason they wanted. Like, if they thought they were batshit insane, they could recall them, and then they would elect a new one. The elected officials of the state, not specifically the people, but it was because it you had that kind of more direct democracy there for the election of state legislatures. The people of the state had a lot of control. So if they were displeased with their senator, their legislature would, in all likelihood, recall that person because their jobs would be on the line. It was a very fascinating system that I would love to bring back, especially into Canada, uh, because fuck our senatorial system in every possible way is it bullshit. Um, it just gets partisans in there uh, that just want a government paycheck and then a government pension, and they serve for life, which is the dumbest fucking shit. Um, Anyways, but you can see with the repealment in the United States, the bureaucracy just takes off because, again, like, you could have senators in there for a long period of time. You also can have Congress people in there for a long period of time. But as the House and Senate have mostly stopped doing their jobs, they no longer vote on single issue bills. They just omnibus this and just like lays the coast through their terms, um, and no longer think about actually doing things. There are a few in there that propose actual good legislation and good bills and want to repeal stuff. Thomas Massey being one of them. Don't agree with him on everything, but if you're looking towards who's a better congressman, yeah, Massey's like on the top of your list because like everybody else sucks so hard. But so you got this God, I can't say the word. Abdication of duty. And again, the bureaucracy started doing the long-term strategic planning, which allowed them to supplant power. And I think part of the reason why, all right, is one, like the class of politician is so low, they can't do long-term strategic planning. Like you do not have anymore, like whatever you think about Henry Kissinger, the man could do long-term strategic planning. All right? He helped craft a very long-term plan for the United States. Was it a bad plan? Absolutely, but you cannot say that, like, even coming up with a long-term bad plan is, by today's standards, an incredible feat, because most senators and congressmen and politicians in general just cannot think past their fucking noses. So thinking, 2 or 3 decades ahead minimum is amazing. And part of the reason of this is because the politicians, because you went from, lords and ladies and just all variety of nobility that were there just constantly, to you now have to look at in political cycles. Shortest I think is like the 2-year cycle, or you have the 2, 4, 5-year cycles of elections. Like the United States, you have federal elections every 2 years for Senate and the House, and you have as well, then every 4 years you have a presidential election, in which now presidents can only serve 2 terms instead of allowing the people to decide how long they serve. It's one of the reasons why I'm really against term limits. Because if you have term limits, all right, like any sense of long-term strategic planning will go out the window and have to be picked up by the bureaucracy, because you can't guarantee, you'll be able to buy a politician that's going to be in there for, 5, 10, 20, 30 years. Like you need long-term strategic planning in a government structure. It's why I am very much in favor of having, say, at least one class of elected official, whether that's, like Congress / Parliament, senators, or even, say, the head figure, the prime minister, president, or whatever, having no term limit, so that there is at least one branch of government that can do long-term thinking, and so you don't have the bureaucracy that is by definition evil. Because like bureaucracy is very much like large shareholder public corporations, where there is no morality at all. So they will just do whatever they think gets them farther ahead. Like if you look at, say, Amazon and Amazon's policy towards its workers in its warehouse and its delivery drivers through its delivery service proxies that are branded as Amazon but are technically semi-independent corporations owned by a franchisee for the most part. Like, you get into the nitty gritty there, and you're like, oh, there, nobody here has a moral fiber in their being. You are just evil motherfuckers, and you can see that with government, right? Bureaucracy at all levels. Like, go try to renew your license. The online, when that works, that's great because you don't have to go to, America. It's what, the DMV in Canada. You've got, like, here in Ontario, Service Ontario. It is just the abject worst feeling in the world to deal with bureaucrats. They're jaded as all hell, and in the best of cases, sometimes you get someone who's new and they're like cheerful and chummy, and hey, that's great. But most of the time, it is just a soul sucking experience because everybody hates what's going on. You can see a real good thing is here in Canada. Look at the explosion in bureaucracy and healthcare, and then track that versus quality of care. It is a direct correlation of increase in bureaucracy, decrease in quality of care. Like, the quality of care I got, you know, 25-ish years ago, when I was a dumb kid and giving myself concussions, was infinitely better than the quality of care you could receive now as a dumb kid giving yourself concussions. And yes, when I was giving myself concussions for doing dumb shit, every time my parents got interrogated and I got interrogated by the doctors, it was like, did your parents do this? And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I hid in a sonotube, which that's the concrete. It's the tube that you put in the ground and then you pour concrete in to protect the concrete from frost. Okay, I hid in one of those, playing hide and seek in the garage. The garage floor is concrete. I could fit in the tube, but I could not use my hands to lift the tube up. So I had to tip my ass over. And in doing so, I smacked my friggin' head against the cardboard that had then hit the concrete, giving myself a nice concussion. And I explained that to them, and then said, you're stupid for even thinking this. But I guess it's a sign of the moral decay that you actually have to assume that with a child, even though they repeatedly say, no, I'm a dumbass. I did a dumb thing. My head hurts because of me. And then the parents are like, yeah, I know what you're going to say. You're going to threaten us with the sending, child protective services. But no, my kid is that dumb. It's just that dumb. You keep saying this, and you all come to the same fucking conclusion every time, because CPS never fucking showed up at the house. Like, they were busy with, like, legitimate problems. They didn't even make, like, a phone call, because the doctors and nurses came to the conclusion that, nah, this kid is just that dumb to do something like that. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. Like, bureaucracy, I mean, there's other reasons why bureaucracy took over. Like, they were given more and more power, but they also seized it because there were power vacuums. As I said, long-term strategic planning. It's gone from the public-facing government. You do not have, like, look here in Canada, okay? Think back through the Trudeau era, all right? Trudeau and his minions, and even his backers, did not have a long-term plan. They just did everything because they couldn't think past their noses, and they're like, oh, we need to do something good for our base. What do we do? We bring in the Syrians. Although that was before Trudeau's time. That was Harper. But Trudeau continued it and expanded it. It's like, this isn't working. Let's double down. Double down. I mean, there's a whole bunch of conspiracies, but when you look at the data, it's like, hey, failing economies inject cheap slave labor to prop up the failing economy. Who would have thought God, I love the fact that Ed Dowd came to that conclusion. Took him a year after I did, but he autistically proved it with data. Whereas I just walked you through the Eurodollar and was like, yeah, this is obviously why they're doing it. You can't have in a modern in a more modern country, you cannot have, 3 or 4% negative GDP. They will do everything in their power to stop that. It's like, even if you look at the World Economic Forum and their supposed long-term plans, it's really just like the next 5 minutes, and then, oh, look, it's flowers and daisies and rainbows for the next 10 years. Like, that's their actual plans. It's ridiculous. And when I say it's, the flowers and daisies and rainbows, from their perspective, not from our perspective, okay? From their evil globalist minds. Just long-term strategic planning is basically dead. The only governments, really, that still have long-term strategic planning ability is Russia and China. And to a lesser extent, you've got North Korea and, of course, Iran. And you've got, like, other Arab nations as well that are still technically on the kingdom model. That where you could say, yes, they have long-term strategic planning, but it's not to the same level of, say, Russia, China, and I would elevate Iran. They have very long-term strategic plans. Like, you used to be able to say Israel had those long-term strategic plans. Now Netanyahu is very much in the how do I survive another month mode. Same with his power faction. So, which is full of extreme zealots who are just the craziest of crazy war whores at this point. So, but that's leading into the topic for tomorrow, where I talk about the problems Trump is going to have with his negotiations and trying to end the war in Ukraine, or at least freeze the conflict so that ongoing negotiations can remedy the problem. Even though I don't see Russia ever agreeing to be like, no, we'll freeze the conflict and then negotiate, because they've done that and it didn't work out for them. Especially with the West being completely untrustworthy. Like, if you get, say, what the West wants, specifically the EU, right? I keep Trump out of this. They want to delay for like 2 or 3 years to the next American election. Use this war to sink the Republican nominee and bring in a Democrat, and then go back to war whoring. But, yeah, topic for tomorrow. Go into much more detail on that. So, until then, have a good day, and see you Friday with more talk about the attempted Ukrainian peace deal.